All yours, Kathy.
Hello. The reason you don't get to see my face at this point in time is we are having really bad weather here. And sometimes when I flip, it freezes. So it's much more important that you guys get to see what's happening on the screen than looking at my face. I want to thank you all for joining us for starters. This was a topic I was really excited to talk about because in so many of the classes I teach, people only grab their eraser to remove a mistake or a mark they don't want somewhere. And erasers are capable of so much more. And that's some of the stuff I want to cover today. This visual on the screen is what happens when you use an eraser that is too harsh for the surface. Your erasing doesn't look like anything at all. And then when you go to either apply the pigment with the pencil tip or with powders or graded pencils, it grabs in that area. And this is what you end up with. It can also, jewelry can do it. Never have a watch or bangles on your hands. Here's an example of just, I had a bracelet on and it created that mark. It's not as harsh as the other ones from using erasers that were too hard for that particular surface. But I wanted to make you aware of the fact that jewelry can do it. You also should make sure your hands are clean. Sometimes people have hand lotion on and it will leave little stains like this, or they've been eating potato chips or something that has a little bit of grease. So you want to make sure you have excess jewelry off and that you don't have lotions or grease on your hand. And perfect segue to what we're going to do today. You don't want to use an eraser that is too harsh. And what I mean by that is it's either very hard or it's too abrasive for that particular surface that you're going to be working on. What I always do before I'm going to start any piece is I make swatches. And this is the swatch of, well, I actually show you the pencils, what the heck. This is our peel and sketch charcoal. It lays down a heavier pigment. So you are going to notice clean erase. Can you see the different amounts that each eraser erases with this pigment on this particular piece of paper? Then I used one of our General's charcoals for these. And again, notice they all lift different amounts of values. Then I used a Kimberly graphite pencil, my absolute favorite graphite pencil. 21 degrees with this, even our 9XXB, which nobody else has. If you are looking for a flat, black, matte graphite. And this one is where, as you'll see in a little bit, this eraser is the one that can extract all the way down to the white of the paper. The next one I used was one of our Primo charcoal pencils, which is a very, very creamy charcoal as opposed to traditional charcoal that's more dry and dusting. You'll notice it's harder to extract because it really penetrates the paper. The next one I used was our carbon sketch pencil. It's a lot like the Primo because it lays down a lot of pigment. Then
Hey, Kathy, just a real quick question before you continue on. Someone in the chat wants to know, is this with like multiple swipes of trying to erase? I'm just kind of wanting to understand how many eraser swipes you're doing to show.
I'm going to show them in a few minutes
Okay.
because some you need. These erasers are so great. The majority of these marks were all done with one swipe, depending on the pigment. I can do a one swipe on with graphite. Actually, these were one swipes. They really were. That's how good these are. I tend to use erasers where I can lift all or the majority in one swipe, because every time you go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, the top layer of the paper, the more you make passes on it, the better your chance you're going to compromise the integrity of it. And that's where all that little pilling starts. And any additional pencil pigment you lay down is going to grab in those areas where there's highs and lows. You know, that's really, if you can get it in one swipe, woo. And the majority of all these erasers, again, it depends on the paper, which I'm going to go into a little bit more, makes all the difference. Okay.
Okay,
Now,
keep going.
this next one was our layout pencil, our 555 layout pencil, which you can find in our Kimberly graphite 525 BP set. It has 3 degrees of the graphite and it has the layout pencil in it. You notice that has the capability to go the darkest with just 1 pencil degree. Then I did one with our Kimberly graphite. Then I did one with our 497 graphite. And you'll notice that's the next segue that I wanted to go into. This was on a 111 pound paper, which tends to grab a little bit. This exact same swatch sheet was done on a piece of 90 pound where the pigment lays a little more on the surface. Look at how much the difference in how much was lifted with each one of these. Can you guys see the difference? I thought this was a great example to show you the surface you're using can totally switch up what is going to be the best eraser for that particular surface. That makes sense, hopefully. So, and I kind of made markings which lifted the brightest in each one of them. This first row was done with our ES20 extra soft white final eraser. It is my go-to eraser for almost any medium. Can you see that? But it didn't lift 100% in this really, really aggressive charcoal where a lot of pigment is laid down. This is so soft. There is, can you see how this just bends? That's why it's my go-to eraser, because even the most delicate papers, there's no way that surface integrity is going to be compromised, even if you go several times. Okay. It's really hard to write directions. I use a lot of sound effects. How do you write that down, right? The next one I used was our GBS 18 on this whole line. Now, a really, really cool thing about this one is nothing totally will erase colored pencil. This, because it's a staining pigment, this will erase 99% of colored pencil. It's going to erase all the layers. When you get down to the very first layer, there's going to be a little staining still obvious to the naked eye because it stained that pigment initially. But even the wax in that first layer, this will remove and not compromise the paper surface. The next row was done with our Factis OV. Again, this is extra soft white vinyl. This is almost like a soap eraser, but again, do you see how soft? Some of the other erasers out there don't bend like this. That's your first clue that that is a eraser that is going to be harsh. You know, its intention is to lift the pigment. If you only do one stroke, that's fine. But when you start doing several passages, it's going to start eating away at the top layer of the paper. The next row right here was done with the tri-tip eraser, which I'm going to show you some fun techniques because look at all the angles that you have to work off of this little guy. The next row was done with that P12, and you can tell I use my erasers a lot. But what's really cool, if I erase with this on a spare piece of paper, all our erasers are self-cleaning. So all this excess is just going to roll right off, and I'm always going to have a clean surface to go in and extract more pigment. Okay. And then the next row was done with too many things out here. Either that or it grew legs. Come on, baby. This is our BM2 Factis pen style eraser. And again, you can just see all these erasers work really, really cool. Someone was asking how many swipes I needed to use on each one of these. Okay, so I laid some pigment out. That's one swipe with the ES20. One swipe with that black 18. One swipe with the OV12. One swipe with the tri-tip. One swipe with our plastic. And one swipe with the pen style eraser. Now you're going to notice I have a really soft brush, almost like a makeup brush, not a lot of hairs in it. Camel hair. Don't make this mistake. People do this all the time and they smear their work. Can you see that? Invest $3, $4 in a cheap mop that does not have a lot of hairs. If it had a lot of hairs, it can tend to embed that debris into your paper too. Because then look at all my lines are nice and crisp. This is how you know you have a really, really good eraser. Now, on this particular paper, I only needed one swipe. Some other papers, I might need 2 or 3. An example of that is sometimes with pastels. The color can make a difference too. This is almost, it's not construction paper. It's just nice, high quality colored paper. But you're gonna notice the kneaded eraser lifted different amounts depending on the pigment. And this is our charcoal white pencil that I use, our 558 charcoal white pencil. You know, the kneaded eraser didn't necessarily lift totally on the white, and you can see different amounts. This one erased all left a little bit of a shadow. Can you see these two have a little bit of shadow? Yet up here, with this color, it totally erased it. So, you know, you really got to get to know your eraser and your surfaces. And again, these were one swipes. These were not back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Okay. Now, I know I'm not supposed to ask you guys yes or no questions. So I'm just going to say, I hope you found this a little bit helpful. Getting back to pastels again, that was colored paper. Now I'm going to do some Me-Tense paper, which has hills and valleys in it. So you're going to notice that that pastel pencil, come on, girl, is going to grab a lot more because there are hills and valleys in this. Go ahead and even blend it in more to show you this. It's going to need a few more swipes. Can you see that? Sometimes you're going to need a few more swipes to get back to that white of the paper, which is the most important reason to have a good quality eraser. This actually is like sandpaper. Look at it, really grabs a lot. So you're going to want to make sure that you have that good eraser because it is going to take a few more swipes. So I hope this kind of gives you an idea what I meant about different surfaces are going to require a different eraser. You might use that ES20 for 9 out of 10 designs. But you're going to come to that one surface that is like, ooh, I'm going to have to step up to that plastic eraser. And we do have a great reference sheet too that I do believe is available at www.generalpencil.com. We literally lay out the type of the pigment, the eraser, the qualities of it, the strengths of it, the surfaces it's compatible with, and the mediums it's compatible with. So hopefully you'll find that a little bit helpful. Now, the main reason I was showing you guys how, for example, this is a perfect erase. This left a lot of pigment behind. This left a little bit of pigment behind, a little less. You look at all the different values that you can get with the same pigment, but a different eraser. So many people think you have to create all your values just with the pencil tip, how light or dark. Work that really looks exciting and dimensional has just as many light values as well as dark values in it. And this is how you can control them. I thought I'd show you this right here as an example. 90% of this was all done with erasers. The whole thing started out dark like this. And then I used different erasers and lifted the pigment out to create all these values, all these different values, and then came in with the pencil tip just for some of these detail lines. So, excuse me. So hopefully this kind of reinforces those swatch sheets I was showing you. And even in the lightest bricks, because we went with our light source, you're going to see it's lighter here and darker here. Even in the lightest areas, I don't know if you can see, there's two different types of erasers were used. And you can see that pen eraser in motion too, to even lift additional lights in it. So erasers are super exciting, guys, if you know how to utilize them. This is another example of brighter whites in the foreground and softer whites in the background to keep the background in the background and the foreground coming forward. And even in this background, it's not the same white value all the way around. Some I erased more, some I used less pressure. The same eraser will create different results depending on the amount of pressure you are using as you are making passes.
Kathy, that was gorgeous. That was absolutely beautiful with how that looked.
Well, thank you.
Someone commented that it looks like wallpaper behind the flowers. That was really pretty.
Well, thank you. Thank you. You know, I always am trying to throw something different in my work to make my work different than someone else's. And that's, I'm sharing a lot of those cool little tips with you guys. Here's an example too. Can you see the different values of the whites in this? They're not all the same value. That's what really makes this pop and these sit in the background. It's your whites as well as your darks that are really going to pop it more. Okay, guys? I'm going to show you. Do you like the, I'm going to have a yes or no. I'm sorry. I'm going to rephrase that. I hope you like the examples that I'm showing, because sometimes a picture's worth 1,000 words. And to be able to create little bits and pieces of all this in just an hour, it's, I'm not that good. Okay?
It's very inspirational. Everyone's loving it.
Wonderful. Now here's another one I wanted you to notice. You know, your whites as well as your darks are what lead the viewer's eye through your design, guys. You know, notice how bright these are. And then as we get further back, they are duller, for lack of a better word. But even all the little snowflakes, you notice some are brighter, some are duller. So I used about 4 different erasers. I did my swatches and I knew which one in just one swipe or one touch to the surface was going to extract all the pigment and what left a little more and a little more and a little more, you know, and that's how I created all the different values, even in the snowflakes, because sometimes instead of adding more pigment in an area, the actual best course of action is to subtract something out of an area. Okay. So I showed you that and that and that and that.
And someone's asking about the brush, and I believe you said it was actually a makeup brush. a good
No,
investment.
it's actually, FM Brush makes it,
FM
it's,
brush. Thank you.
yeah, it's a Dynasty 8500 and it's a number 10. I
Thank
mean,
you.
just
All right.
look, there's not a lot of hair. See, this is like a mop brush.
There we
And
go.
it's there's so many more difference. And I use this when I want to rouge pigment in, when I want to embed it in the pigment, when I want to just remove, I have to use something that has hardly any hairs at all.
And I like how you hold it at the tip so that it flows and it's not putting a lot of pressure right at that point to embed.
Yeah, no, I mean, it reminds me, it's almost like when I run this against my hand, it's almost like butterfly kisses, with your eyelashes on your hand. I mean, you barely feel any pressure. Whereas if you use a big mop brush, you feel a lot of pressure. Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I've got this up. I guess I'll switch over to this real quick. I wanted to show you, besides extracting, you can deposit images and pigment, especially with, so you can tell I did this for the fresh side, with that Factis ES20 extra soft white vinyl eraser. So I'm going to take a sanding paddle real quick, and I'm going to take some pigment. You could use powder, but powder is meant for toning, this nice soft toning that you get. When you grate the pigment from a sanding paddle, the particles are a little more dense. If this is a 2B, so they're going to be kind of soft. We might get a little bit of granular residue. The harder the degree, the more granules. The softer the degree, it's moving its way towards the powder. So for starters, I'm going to pick some pigment up. And this is really, really fun.
I'm excited to do this. Yeah.
Sometimes I will start my brick walls this way. This is what I mean about that unexpected mark right off the bat. Before I even put any pencil in it, I can turn around and do something cool like this. I see I have a little more right here. So what else would this maybe do? Set it down and pull it. Couldn't you see that in a fence post or grains in wood or on a tree trunk? And so many people say, well, why didn't you just do that with the pencil? Because the pencil's more precise. So see, if I come back in with that precise pencil, is that showing up?
Yeah, absolutely. You could see.
And you see right off the bat how many values, and some of it is diffuse, some of it's real precise. Guys, I use my erasers for so much. Another fun thing I could do is, let's grate some pigment right on here. And I'll take this same puppy. Actually, I'm going to clean it first. Watch. You see how I got all that off there? And now I'm just going to pretend I'm spinning off a bottle cap. It's marks like this that have them turn around and go, how the heck did they do that? It's just fun, loose things that I love to do. You can also make a very, very diffuse pattern within a pattern. See how that's showing up? This is an instant way, and this is fun for your backgrounds. And you can even make them go all different directions, just to add very, very subtle interest. Fun for mixed media, lots of fun for mixed media. And again, that's just your background. If I were to turn around and then put a design on top of that, see how that made that background so much more interesting than just one solid color, okay? Or now this was, I use a lot of stencils, and all kinds of fun patterns. This was just a piece of drywall tape that I laid down and then put some powder on it and lifted it up and got that pattern. But again, great mixed media or whatever, you can actually make two patterns within patterns.
Mhm.
And look at, it's a good eraser. I'm just touching it. Now, I'll redo that one. I'll lift really hard there. See how much brighter that one is than if I
Wow.
barely touch it.
Yeah, they're very interested on the doily too, on how you made the lace, that lace pattern.
Well, you know what, guys? I used to hand draw my lace. And one day, I'm not a baker. One day I was in Michael's and I was going past the baking aisle and I saw the silly doilies and I'm like, oh, I wonder if that would work. So all I did literally, guys, was lay it down. I loaded my brush with some of the graded pigment that I had that I put out and literally and lifted it. But why I wanted to show you that is, let's say now, right now, I love it because you can see more than one value. But let's say I was like, ooh, that is too dark for me. A kneaded eraser is what everyone usually picks up. But a kneaded eraser, guys, sometimes can grab too much pigment. I'm going to barely touch it. And then I'm going to touch more pressure. You see, lots of times it'll take way more off than you want. And you're working around that design that it tends to want to make. Again, that ES20, I just showed you here how much pressure will determine how much it lifts off. This is my go-to. Let's say I just wanted this a little bit darker, just those two. Or I wanted to lighten all this area. Do you see how I'm just touching it? See how I altered it from there to there?
Oh, that's dramatic. Look at that. So
Yeah.
Sarah's asking a question. She says, but the eraser looks very black. Does that not impact how much it picks up?
This one?
Mm-hmm.
No, believe it or not. I know. I mean, when it gets to the point that it's really dark, or if I want 100% pure clean, I'll just turn around and erase it again. And another cool thing about this eraser, I can cut this into any shape I want because it's so pliable. I've made little triangle shapes to go in, or squares or rectangles. You know, I'm not limited to this shape, the shape that it actually comes out of the package into. You can also even put things like Sharpie marker on this or paint and stamp designs. And then when it dries, erase that layer. That layer is going to just roll right off, and it's just going to roll right back off. That's would have been all that marker or paint, and you're back to that clean surface again.
And the ES20 is what you were using on the drywall tape, right?
Yes, but let me pick up a different, I mean, I could have used almost any of them. Let me use the ES20 acts like the magnet more than the rest of them. So now I'm going to turn around and I'm going to use my P12. Look at that. You cannot go wrong with any of these erasers.
So
okay.
the question,
the P12, the main thing to remember about this, let me show you the chickadee again. You can see up close different whites, right? These are brighter whites than these. This was all filled in with powder. And then I used my BM2 to lift all these areas, but I didn't want these as bright as that. So that's when I switched over to my tri-tip eraser and my black eraser. What's great about the black eraser is when you erase on white paper, it doesn't leave a mark. Whereas on black paper, lots of times If you use a white eraser on black paper, it leaves a little bit of a shadow mark. Now
Mhm.
watch, I can remove those shadow marks with this black eraser. It was initially created for when you erase on dark paper or mattes, it doesn't leave that white mark. See the difference?
Yeah.
Is it noticeable enough,
Yeah,
Melanie?
you can see
Yeah,
a difference. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
So, just FYI, we're at the half-hour mark.
good.
Yep. And there was a question about how do you store your erasers? Is there an issue with them drying out or cracking or anything?
No, the only one that you have to worry about drying out is your kneaded eraser.
That's what I thought.
So
Yeah.
I usually wrap my kneaded eraser either in plastic wrap, or I actually have small little baggies,
Mm,
that I will put that in. And that is a really great segue to, I keep several kneaded erasers around. Some of my older ones, and sadly, I'm sorry I don't have them out, are super, super dirty. First of all, if you want a clean spot in your kneaded eraser, this reminds me a lot of silly putty. All
yeah.
you do is fold it into itself and it's self-cleaning. And eventually you're going to get yourself another clean spot. This one is very tacky because I just took it out. So it's going to lift a lot. Some of my dirtier, older ones, where is my bag? They're not as tacky. They're not dried out, but they're not as tacky. So if I wanted to just barely lift out in an area, I would use one of my older ones, which I'm very sorry. I just came back from a travel teach and I don't know where my older ones are. So if, right now it's real tacky. After a point, and when you touch it, it's not tacky, but it still lifts. That will lift a darker value. Not as much pigment is going to come out right away. So again, I switch up my kneaded erasers too. Kneaded erasers really are meant to just lighten the value. But again, I tend to go with some of my other erasers more because it's so easy to pull too much out with it. Okay. So this is me barely touching it. This is me putting a lot of pressure.
Mhm.
So that's what kneaded erasers were originally made for. But you guys find cool shapes to make them into. And can you see, doesn't that kind of look like the beginning of rocks right off the bat?
Yeah, like a
Yes,
cobblestone pathway or something like that.
here's an example. Those rocks, because I didn't want them. These rocks are very distinct. These were drawn in, and then I took my BM pen style eraser. Why does it keep running away from me?
You keep covering it up, huh?
I keep covering it up. I wanted them brighter, so I use this right here, my pen style. But for these, I just bloop, 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 because I wanted them further in the distance. I switch up my erasers all the time. You are going to see that some of these whites are much brighter than some of these whites. And that's by switching up your eraser. I always, on the outsides of my designs, I have swatches and I test out every eraser to see how much it's going to work out. And I always work with 2 or 3 erasers for everything.
That's a great idea.
And I always test before I extract. Okay. So that's the fun way to do it. I told you one of the reasons I love this little tri-tip is because I have all these different angles. So many times they are my fence posts for starters. But let's say I wanted to extract. Notice what I do with this too. You see how that lightened it, but I didn't have to deal with any marks that kneaded eraser would have made. I use this a lot just if I've toned something darker than I wanted it in the first place. Okay, show you here. See how that lightened it? But I didn't have to deal with specific marks. And I love going into small sections with this as opposed to this. You know, I don't have that little corner, you know, so then I'm kind of trying to go like that. If I want distinct, I go with my tri-tip. If I want it more egg shape, oblong, whatever, then I would pick up my OV12. And even the width of the lines is going to be a little bit different too. Okay, getting back to the Factis. Anytime you have real aggressive graphite, and what I mean by that, or pastel or charcoal, where you have several layers you have laid down, this is my go-to, the plastic. You can see it's still pretty pliable, but if you squeeze it, it doesn't squeeze as much. It's not as squishy. It's not hard, it's dense. See, that's a secret. So many erasers are hard. They don't need to be hard, they need to be denser, and it will effortlessly. That was one swipe, guys. That wasn't even back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Me going back and forth is not going to make that any brighter. It is an amazing one. And also, if we have any decorative painters viewing this, or people who like to do designs on wood, and then whether they're going to go back and wood burn or paint, or just go back and do pen and ink linear on it. It's really hard to get graphite lines off of wood. This will take them off effortlessly.
Wow.
Yes, yes. What else was I gonna share? Oh, the boo-boo again. So let's say you have a boo-boo. And like I said, I just quickly did this really quick. Was planning to do a really nice design for you last night, but we lost power at 7:30 and didn't get it back till this morning. So this is a lighter version of that boo-boo. Can you see how it grabbed in a few areas? This one actually was darker. So let's turn a boo-boo into a, you can't always fix a boo-boo, but lots of times, by gosh, I'm gonna try to. Where'd my boo-boo sheet go? I'm gonna actually start it on this to show you. The first thing you can do is say, what could I maybe turn this into? Well, that's where your erasers are going to come in then, because we could start extracting and breaking that up more and turning this maybe. Now, a lot of pressure, less pressure. Okay. So let's, for starters, can you see how I kind of broke that up and I could maybe turn this into something? I could come in with this one and try to just break that up. This one isn't going to take as much off, but you see how suddenly I'm creating dimension. The lines are thinner and lighter, wider and brighter. Can you see how I can, with a little bit of TLC, start breaking some of this up to make it look like we actually wanted this? And then, for lack of a better one, I'm going to use a real dark pencil. Let's say we actually wanted to try to develop a tree or something on it. Okay. Let's put some charcoal white to alter that value look. You're kind of getting the idea how we could really somehow break. Sometimes you can turn, you know, a frown into a smile just by thinking outside the box. Let me soften those lines a little bit. That's darker than I wanted them, but I need to add more in here to break it up some. Let's grab a regular charcoal pencil to get some different values. Can you kind of see? Is this helpful? I am going to ask one yes, no, or maybe.
I like that.
So, you know, all is not lost sometimes with the boo-boo. I always will take any boo-boo and play around with it. Notice here's another brush I'm using. Look how I can tone and soften. This is another Dynasty brush. This is an IPC2. It's the small flat blender. Okay. And then again, sometimes adding more darks isn't the answer. Remember how I said that? Yes, no? Oh, I did it again. Yes, no, maybe. So say that in my classes a lot. So sometimes adding more isn't the answer. It's taking out. And you never want that solid line of the same value. So maybe I'm going to come in with my Kneaded at one point and extract a little bit that way, because I wouldn't want that as bright. And then maybe I would come in where I really wanted it lighter with that one, which was the plastic one. Let's say I wanted to come in with, see, they're all going to lift different amounts. So I always go with, I want to alter my lights as well as my darks. Now this time, the reason I made so many passes is I didn't know how much I wanted to extract. So I barely touched it to the paper first. Okay, and then it's like, oh, that was too much. Well, guess what? Because we did not hurt or compromise the surface integrity, I can keep coming back in and I'm not going to get those little fuzzies that would have happened. So
I'm going to quote somebody in the chat that says, it's blowing my mind how much versatility you can achieve just with erasers.
thank you. Thank you. Then let's rouge a little bit in. Where'd my pre-graded go? Gonna have to grade a little more. Come on, great. I'll pull this paper out. I guess I'll just, look, isn't that starting to look like maybe we could salvage that into something? Yes, no, I did it again.
Yeah.
I'm terrible about it.
It's really good.
Because I love when my students interact with me. It just, we get too many yeses in the chat bar, hopefully, not no's. And it's harder for people to follow questions. If we had any questions. Now, I took a little bit of that pigment. Do you see how now I'm putting, let's get a few bushes in here too. Get more in so we could turn around. Kneaded and maybe and you see how suddenly we are kind of turning this into a I meant to do that kind of thing.
Looks great.
And then you can come back even with that pencil tip. It's starting to maybe look like something, hey? And then we could put other little trees, smaller trees, branches coming out. I don't know what our time is, darling.
You're at the 15-minute mark.
Okay, obviously I'm going to give a little shout out to sharpeners too, because I need to sharpen this. Two things make a good sharpener, guys: the type of the blade and the angle of the blade. You are going to want a stainless steel German blade. General angles all of their sharpeners to give you a factory point, that exact same point you get coming right out of the box with very few twists and turns, okay? Now, actually, I really should have switched to a lighter value pencil. So I'll just throw a graphite in. What the heck? Just to kind of give you the idea as you're going further back, if you're going to add more, see how that's lighter than this is? That's another big mistake everyone makes, whether it's their pencils or their erasers, is as you move back, it's got to be more diffused and it's got to be a lighter value if the foreground's dark, or the reverse, darker if the foreground is really, really bright. Okay. What else? What else? What else? Let me flip over to, oh, did want to mention this too. This is our sketch and wash, our water soluble graphite. Okay, when you just draw in its dry state, totally erasable. Once you wet it, all those lines dissolve and you can create all these different values. When it dries, it's permanent. So you could either come back and further develop with the Kimberly graphite pencils or our semi-hex ones. Erase off of it, everything. That is the only way you can lighten the values, is once it's dry, you can slightly alter those values. Did that, hopefully that showed up. Otherwise, it is totally sealed. You can put color over it, and then continue to build off of it with almost any medium, really, guys. So I wanted to make sure, and that for that one, I always use my extra soft white vinyl eraser because that was watercolor paper, especially watercolor paper, guys, or rice papers. There's little fibers, cotton fibers in them, and it's so easy for you to, if you make too many passes, it's going to lift those fibers up, and any additional pigment you put down is going to just grab on those little fibers.
Yeah, Monica
I
said
did
that-
have one more.
Monica said that she has always thought of erasers for correction only. She loves the different ways that she's learning how to use erasers. And Janine said, I had been taught to draw on tone paper with a plastic eraser, but I had no idea how many kinds of erasers there were, how many different ways to use them. So everyone's loving all the education and versatility.
Oh, that makes my day. That makes my day. Want to show you one more example real quick. Let's get the whole thing in the screen. And maybe this is another good example to really solidify what I've been saying. Darkest here, all pencil tip. Obviously, this was that little template, but notice how I kept these in the background. Most of this was all just blocked in with a 2H pencil. And this was all, I took my kneaded eraser and lifted out some values, not all. So I could come back in with that BM2 and even extract more to create the lines within them as well. And but yeah, you can see they stay in the background and then you're moving towards the foreground. These flowers look like they're sitting on top of everything. One more thing is you'll notice the lines, some are thinner, some are thicker. You're not limited to the diameter of the pen style eraser, which by the way, they have 3-pack refills too. I'm going to push the top in and I'm going to put this back in just about where I want it, release that top, it's good to go. So this is going to make a line. I mean, I can make it real dark, but let's say I wanted it thinner. I could grab scissors and cut it thinner. But what I like to do is I just put my finger on top of it, turn it over, and I just do some erasing. And then I'll flip it and do it to the other side. And now you'll see I changed the size of that tip to make it more of an angle. So it would make a different shape line. I can even make it thinner. I can turn it into, you know, a solid core. I can make it angular. So, and then you get all these different, I mean, I love doing this kind of stuff too for a little bit of texture and stuff, guys. I really do. And let's say I had it brighter than I wanted it. Well, I could turn around and just push it in even a little bit so it's not as bright. I could turn around and put more pigment on it. There, there are just so many different additional things that you can do with these erasers. Like I said, great for vein lines, grasses, but even if you're going to do those grasses, start out with a few like this, switch over to the corner of a wider one, because we are going to want, it's going to look much more interesting and dimensional if everything is not the same width. Didn't press as hard, left a little bit, pressed a little harder, actually used a little bit of pressure, got that much right off the bat. And I will do it with all of them because I never know. Well, I shouldn't say I never know. For this type of paper, they're going to give different lights and darks, because I've used the ultimate eraser for that surface, the ones that almost extracted everything. This is where I go back to that sheet. Which one, let's say this one, which one right here? Okay, this will make the dirtiest white. This will make the next second to dirtiest. Oh, now this is going towards light. This is almost everything. That's the brightest. Your little swatch sheet is going to tell you right off the bat what eraser is going to give what value in that area. And every single area I approach with a minimum of 2 and hopefully 3 techniques, 3 values, 3 erasers.
Kathy, they want to know, do you use any fixative at the end of your art?
Oh, good question. I'm going to throw this little thing in. Let's say you got one too dark. I always make sure I have a few dirty tortillions too, because look what I can do if I made something too dark. If I'd used a pencil tip, there's a good chance it would have laid down more than I wanted. Do you see how I changed that up? And I can skinny something up if I don't like it. So I just thought I would throw that in. Fixatives, glad you asked. If I am working on a surface that allows me to put a spray fixative on it, I just use like Krylon spray fixative. But let's say I'm working on a surface that isn't as conducive to spray fixatives, or a pastel. Pastels, not so much your earth tones, but your bright colors. When you spray them, it dulls them. Those colors just dull right down. So what I do instead, I was like, what did Michelangelo do when he needed to seal his work before fixatives? I don't know why I always talk that way, but I think he talked like that. I don't know. So, I just kept thinking, and I found the secret. Good old fashioned tissue paper from the store. One side shiny, one side dull. You want to put the dull side down. And I use a metal tablespoon or soup spoon, lay it over, and then I rub. This is burnishing. All a smear is excess pigment that's the paper couldn't absorb. Your paper can only absorb so much. And again, that's the surface. If it has hills and valleys, it's going to absorb more. If it's super smooth, the pigment might want to just sit on top of it, which makes it real easy to blend. But those you really need to fix. Okay. So all the excess that's sitting on top, I'm pushing the particles into the paper as much as the paper can absorb. What the paper can absorb, the tissue paper does. You see that? There's my design. Don't throw this away. So many times I'll do like a collage background. So I'll turn around and I'll just place all these little things in the background adhered to the paper, and then come back with my pencil tip and create a design on top of it. It's really cool. So never throw anything away.
I asked if you can use hairspray as a fixative.
Can you see how this isn't smearing now?
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. Hairspray, I used to teach school. Hairspray is what teachers use because they can't afford fixative. The bad thing about hairspray is you don't know the pH balance.
So it can
And
affect.
through time, it can eat away at that paper and it just turns into nothing. If you're going to use a spray fixative, you want to hold the, first of all, shake it really good. Try it on a spare piece of paper in case it's going to go, you know, spit. Hold it a good 12 inches away from the paper and literally be very, very controlled. A light spray, let that dry, and then come back and go this way to fill in the blanks. You want a very, very light spray.
And then
Okay.
one other question is, how do you clean off the rolled paper point, the tortillon? How do you clean that?
You know what? What I just do with my tortillons is just this. There's no way you can wash them. And you know, this is not going to turn around and carry over into my paper, or very, very little. I usually keep one side dirty. I start with the clean one. Notice this one. Okay, you can tell this one I only used on this side. See how those sides are clean still? So for initial applications or real soft, I start with my clean. Actually, each one of mine have a real dirty side. One that has just a little bit that's going to leave this. All right, that side left this. Now this side is going to leave a darker value. Can you see that?
Someone's suggesting that you can sand them too.
You know, I've never tried, in all honesty. And I prefer tortillons over blending stumps. I shouldn't say I prefer it. I use, if I want the value to stay the same, I use a tortilla. If I maybe want to lighten it a little bit, I will use a blending stump. The blending stumps tend to, and I have one here somewhere, absorb a little bit of the pigment.
2 minutes. 2 minutes.
All right. Any more questions? No question.
Popping up.
I know you're going to hate me for saying this. Did you guys find this helpful and enjoyable?
Yes, everyone is thanking you. Yes, very helpful, very much eye-opening.
And you know what? I mean, I want to give a quick plug out to General Pencil too. Myself, as well as a lot of other artists, have done short little videos for them, even talking more about the erasers or the pencils or whatever. And it's really cool to see their products in action. So we hope you stop by their website and check out some of these videos, as well as the ones that we've done in the past for Michael's and we're doing right now. I mean, we have past videos in their library, guys. So hopefully you will look at them as well.
All right. Thank you, guys.